Welcome to No Te Rindas Intermediate English, home of the Intermediate English app, disponible en noterrindaspodcast.us. Este es un podcast para hispanohablantes que quieren mejorar su comprensión auditiva del inglés de los Estados Unidos. Somos dos hermanos americanos con raíces mexicanas. Soy Gabo, o Gabe, aquí con mi hermano mayor Goyo, o Greg.
Buenos dias. Good morning, everybody. Gabe, I'm on vacation. My students have left for the semester, and I can sleep a little bit. How are you?
I'm good. I'm just glad that you made it through the end of the first half of the school year. And I remember last time we were talking, you were worried that you were going to run out of patience. In other words, you were going to lose your patience and with these kids that were so excited about the winter holiday.
That's right. And we thought it would be fun now that we're in the full swing of the Christmas holidays to talk about our Christmas memories.
That's right. Today we were going to think about some memories that we had together at Christmas time. Greg and I grew up in different houses because we are what they call half brothers. So we have the same father, but different mothers. And Greg grew up with my dad, and I grew up with my mom, and I only saw Dad for like 2 weeks at Christmas, and I saw Dad for about a month in the summertime. So it was always really special to get to see Greg at Christmas because we didn't see each other most of the year.
That's right. So unlike your memories with your siblings, perhaps where you have a lot of memories of pain or argument or things like that, Gabo and I were mostly spared from that. No teníamos problemas uno con el otro. Nos llevábamos muy bien. So we have some fun stories to tell you about that time in our lives. Today we're going to be using a lot of past tense forms, including what they call the preterite or el pretérito simple and el imperfecto or el pretérito imperfecto. So, for example, I'll be saying, or Gabe will be saying that somebody went somewhere, como fue, and we would do something. We would go somewhere. We would play.
Right. So like we would eat cookies would be like comíamos galletas.
Mm-hmm. We're also going to be using there were to state general truths, como había. So there were always parades on television during the Christmas season, or there were always cartoons on TV on Saturday mornings, that kind of thing.
Right. Well, we usually would have our vocabulary list here, but because this is more of a conversational episode, we decided we would not have a vocabulary list today. So we will get straight to the episode, unless there's something that you want to tell us about first, Greg.
Well, as a matter of fact, we've got something very helpful to tell you about, oyentes. Si te gusta escuchar nuestros episodios y si usas Android, lo clave, puedes bajar nuestra app, o mejor decir, nuestras apps, gratis, de Google Play. Brindamos enlaces en nuestra página noterrindaspodcast.us a todas las apps disponibles en ese momento. Por ejemplo, hoy tenemos, Gabe, 3 juegos que corresponden a 15 episodios de No Te Rindas Intermediate English. Si quieres practicar tu inglés con nosotros poco a poco, día tras día, baja una app. Es gratis. Visita noterrindaspodcast.us y haz un clic en la pestaña para aplicaciones. Gracias.
Y oyentes, Greg y yo compusimos estas aplicaciones nosotros mismos. Try one and tell us what you think.
So our father had a room in his home that you would call a sala in most Spanish-speaking places. I know in Peru they call it un living. So we would have Christmas morning in the living room.
Right, the living room. So the living room is the biggest room in the house usually, and it's not a bedroom. It's a place where people would traditionally do things like if guests came over, they would sit and we would all sit in the living room and talk. Or it's also a place where people traditionally now watch TV, right?
Yes, although in our living room growing up, we did not have a television for very long because my stepmother was a piano teacher. So we had a grand piano in the living room and then, a sofa and a couple of comfortable chairs. And so this is where the Christmas tree would go or would be placed. And, the boxes with the presents would go under the tree. And then on Christmas morning, you would burst through that door, Gabe, and see what Santa Claus had left you. And as Dad used to say, Santa Claus broke open his sack. Right? He broke open his sack at our house.
Yes, he said that even when we were grown, he would always say, "Well, I hope Santa breaks his sack at your house," so that the idea is that a bunch of extra presents would fall out, extra gifts or toys would fall out. But that's right. I remember, of course, Dad had remember how there was a door that led into the living room that was it was a swinging door. So it was a door that would open in both directions, and it didn't really close like a traditional door. It had a spring on the hinge so that it would hold it in a closed position. But that way you could just, I guess, if you were going to serve, food, because there was a dining room in there too, you could just push on the door with your foot if you had your hands full of food. But so that's the door we would burst through to see what was in the living room.
That's right. And my memory of these toys includes lots of things for drawing and art, plastic toys that you could use like an Etch-a-Sketch where you could draw and then shake it and it would erase itself. And man, one year we had different kinds of car racing games o videojuegos o juguetes normales que empleaban alguna forma de un carro. But I think my favorite toy that we ever got, it was so simple. It was what we call an analog tape recorder or a grabadora de cinta. And it had a built-in microphone. And you would press, I think, record and play at the same time. And we had a stack of cassette tapes. And I know it's hard for our loyal listeners, our listeners who listen week after week. I know it's hard for you to imagine, but Gabe and I actually enjoyed tape recording our voices and telling stories and then listening to them later. I know that's incredibly hard to believe, given that we now make a podcast, but that was, to me, Gabe, kind of like the birth of our podcast, 40-something years ago, that we would come up with sound effects and we would make commercials. Y lo que necesitan saber, oyentes, es que en esta época tuvimos dos fuentes de medios. Uno fue las caricaturas las mañanas de los sábados y con sus comerciales correspondientes. Muy importante. So we watched cartoons on Saturday mornings and watched the commercials, right? The commercials were often humorous. They were funny, or they, they told very short stories so that the resolution of the story was to buy the product, of course. But then the other big one was Sesame Street, Plaza Sésamo in otros lugares. Mirábamos Plaza Sésamo como una religión. I loved that show. And we would imitate those characters on the tape recorder. So, I mean, I loved my toy McDonald's that I got. I loved the chalks and the paints. But making little recordings with you and the cat, for example, because we had a cat named Tiger, and he would purr into the microphone. Él ronroneaba en el micrófono o maullaba. It was just so much fun. So that's my most precious toy memory from Santa Claus. What do you remember, Gabe?
I remember that Christmas because Santa brought us both tape recorders. They were the same exact model. But I remember I must have been about 5 or 6, and you must have been 11 or 12.
Mm-hmm.
Because I couldn't read yet very well, because I remember one of the tapes that we still have somewhere. You were like, Gabriel, read this word, and it was the word LOAD. And I said load. I was trying to sound it out, and you were like, it's load. And I was like, load.
I remember that too. So ¿cómo se dice load? ¿Ese sería como cargar o
quizás
meter en el tocador, algo así?
Sí, tenemos que meter la cinta en el tocador. We have to load the cassette into the tape player. So you could play other tapes, of course. You could play, tapes of music, for example. That was before compact discs or CDs, which are now sort of obsolete also, but
dinosaurios, sí.
But the speaker on that tape recorder was not very good. It was not very big. But the idea that you could carry this around with you and listen to stuff was just magical. So that's a very happy Christmas memory of mine, too. So I'm so glad that you remember that. And, you were the one that got the idea to record us, and make some things that were funny. I remember, getting tickled getting tickled is another way of saying, laughing, finding something really funny to the point that you laugh. I remember getting tickled at things you did and laughing on the recording, and hearing myself laugh in my little tiny 5 or 6-year-old voice. So
yeah, your voice is a little deeper now than it was then, for sure.
Although I still have a Southern accent, just like I did. Before we get to like the clearest Christmas memory I have, Dad would put, when I, at least was old enough to remember it, Dad would put up Christmas decorations, and he really liked these sort of cellophane foil type decorations that they were 3-dimensional, like you could store them and they were flat, and then you could like close them like a book, I guess, kind of, and when you would close them it would form a shape like a ball or a sphere, and they were usually green or red and very shiny. Do you remember him putting those up when you were little, like when you were a small child?
Yeah, sí. Para describirlo un poquito en español, eran de aluminio. Y por eso súper luciente, y se construían en tiras. Entonces, cuando estaban puestas, correctamente, eran como, ¿cómo lo dirías? Una explosión, como la luz que escapa del sol. Nuestro papá los llamaba. Do you remember that?
I'd forgotten that he called them that.
He would say,
Yeah.
we need to go get the como para imitar el sonido de la explosión que
Parecía.
sí, que fingía, exactamente.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I remember that's a happy memory because my mother would decorate for Christmas, but we didn't have anything like those things. So the Christmas I remember best, you must have been 15, which would have made me 9 years old. And the reason I remember it is because you weren't driving yet, but you were riding a bike a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the Christmas that Santa brought you a bike helmet.
Oh.
You really were excited about a bike helmet. And when you're a little child, Christmas is really exciting. So I've always been was always a child that woke up early anyway. But especially on Christmas, I was excited and I would want to get up and see the presents, to see, the gifts that Santa had left. And that was such a strange Christmas. I don't know why Dad decided to do that. And it may have been, I don't know, it could have been our stepmom's idea, but that Christmas, they almost did it like Hanukkah. And Hanukkah involves the children being left presents several nights in a row. And we're not Jewish, but I remember that Christmas, Santa Claus came several nights in a row and brought a few presents. Do you remember that?
No, you are teaching me something. I have no memory of this.
So I remember the first morning, or the morning that Santa brought your bike helmet, waking you up and saying, let's go see what Santa brought. And we were sleeping on the floor for some reason. I remember Dad would often make a pallet. A pallet is like when you take padding or blankets and put them on the floor so that you can sleep on the floor. That's one of the ways they use the word pallet. In this case, it's like a makeshift bed on the floor. And we would sleep on a pallet together, when I was visiting. And I guess Dad just, either we wanted to sleep in the same room, or Dad liked the idea of us, sleeping in the same room some of the time. So those are happy memories. But I remember waking you up and you were on the floor, and we went in there, and I remember you found your bike helmet, which is just a what are you, a casco?
Un casco, sí.
Un casco para proteger la cabeza cuando estás de bicicleta. So I remember you put the bike helmet on, and then you got back in bed and laid down and fell asleep with the bike helmet on your head.
Me dormí llevando el casco. Ninguna memoria, ningún recuerdo de eso. Wow, really?
Yes,
explains all my neck pain now.
It was a white helmet, and I remember later you added some customized pinstripes to it. You took some strips of cinta and you put them on there, some colored strips to make it look cooler. So that Christmas, Santa Claus brought me sports stuff.
Oh.
So I remember, like, it was, and a lot of it was sports stuff that you could do by yourself. So I guess Dad, knew that I was the only child at my house and I might not have people to play with. So, like, I remember one of the things Santa Claus brought was a soccer ball, una pelota de fútbol, un balón de fútbol. And it had a net, una red, and this net went over the football, and then the net had a long string, like a stretchy string,
Oh.
a string that would stretch, and you could stake the string into the ground. So in other words, you could stick the string, you could use a metal spike,
Un clavo.
and put it in the ground, and then you could kick that soccer ball, and it wouldn't go very far, and then it would come back to you because the string would pull it back to you. So I remember he gave me, that's one of the things I remember Santa Claus giving me that Christmas, and I remember playing with it a lot in the front yard.
Wow, and I don't remember that at all. I have 2 car memories. Do you remember the figure 8, the ocho racetrack with the 2 slots in it so that cars could race side by side with remote controls?
Yes, I vaguely remember the way those looked and the way the little handheld devices work, because all it was just a
trigger.
a trigger that you would squeeze and then the car would go.
So no sé cómo se diría trigger, pero es la parte de una pistola que aprietas para disparar. Teníamos 2 de estos sin balas, claro, simplemente para crear más velocidad, y pues hacíamos carreras in estas vías. Will you talk a little bit about your memory of the video game? That was the very first video game I ever owned, and it had a racing component. Do you remember that?
I very vaguely remember us having some sort of primitive early video game. The one I remember had like Pong on it, which was like,
that's right.
It was like como tenis, or a very simple version of tennis. But I do remember one where there was a very primitive racing game, and you would turn this little dial, and when you turned the dial to the left, the car would move to the left, and when you turned the dial to the right, it would move to the right along this very primitive track.
So that, I think you would call that a steering wheel or a volante. I mean, it was big enough that you could grab it with 2 hands and steer it like a car. I felt like a really big kid with that. Do you remember that it had a duck shooting game?
I do remember it having a gun. Yeah, it had a gun component, and there was like this little, basically just un cuadro, a square of light that would move around that you could shoot. The game was in black and white. I vaguely remember that, and that was, sort of before the first
Atari, or
the Atari, which was the first major home video game system, which would have come out in like 1980, 81, 82, somewhere in that range. So, wow.
Yeah, we played with that a lot. I mean, yeah. All right. Well, I have a confession to make to you, Gabe, where I need to beg your forgiveness. Ruego tu perdón, hermano mío. We were driving to you, Dad and I, and probably our stepmom. We were driving to you, and you might have been in Tennessee, you might have been in Mississippi, but I guess we were recogiéndote, right? We were picking you up so that we could take you back to Hattiesburg. This is where I lived as a child in South Mississippi. And you had received your Santa Claus toys in your mother's home. So I was visiting you in your mother's home. And that year you had received a drum kit, como de baterista. And you'd also received a golf game. So you had golf clubs and little plastic balls that you could hit, like Tiger Woods or something, although Tiger Woods probably wasn't born yet. But anyway, no había nacido. So I wanted to play those drums, Gabe. I really did. That was amazing. You had cymbals, you had a bass drum, you had a snare drum. It was fabulous. And I took one of the golf clubs because there was more than one. I remember thinking, well, there's more than one of these golf clubs. And I broke it in two. I mean, we're talking about 3 hours after you had gotten it. I broke it. And so I had a stick to hit the drums with. And your mother came in the room and saw that broken golf club. And, I was only going to be there for a few minutes. I only saw your mother a few minutes a year. And suddenly she became angry. She's like, that was not broken just a few minutes ago. And man, I felt like dirt under the rug. I mean, I felt horrible. So I'm sorry that I broke your golf game so I could play drums, Carnal.
Well, I accept your apology. I can see the look on my mother's face.
Yes.
I have never heard this story, so it must have been like a little toy drum set, which means I would have been little. So I wonder how old you were.
I mean, it was probably before you were in Nashville. Where you spent part of your childhood. So I was
that would have meant
14. Yeah, you were 8 or 9. So you were smaller than that. You were probably 5, 6 years old.
Yeah. Yeah. I by the time I was 6, I lived in Nashville. So it would have meant I was 4 or 5. So yeah. Well, I'm sure that we can discuss some way you can compensate me for that.
Recompensa. Hay que recompensar, sí.
Oh,
damages.
Yeah.
Damages. Well, I felt bad about that for 45 years now. So I feel very good being able to tell you. I think this has been like therapy for me. I feel rejuvenated. Yeah. I feel renewed. Gracias.
You can let that go now and feel good that you are forgiven. I have no interest in golf, even to this day. So
probably, si no hubiera destruido el equipo, habrías jugado golf profesionalmente o algo así. It's all my fault. Mi culpa.
Well, why don't we do a little quiz and see if any of our listeners who are still awake and with us might remember what we did. You want to do a quiz question about your Christmas memories?
Sure. All right, it's time for our quiz. Here comes question number 1. Gabe, what was my favorite item that I received from Santa Claus? Was it A, a ping pong paddle and a ping pong table? B, a tape recorder that you and I used to use to make commercials and little skits and shows on? Or C, a football helmet? What was my favorite Christmas toy that I remember receiving from Santa Claus?
Well, I don't remember playing ping pong with you, although that's a fun game. And I remember something about a helmet, but it wasn't a football helmet. So your favorite Christmas present that you were talking about was that tape recorder that you and I used to record our own little stories and commercials.
That is correct. We were podcasting before there were even podcasts invented. We should be very proud of that. All right, how about you take question number 2?
Okay, number 2. Greg, you heard this story for the first time, and it's about you and a Christmas morning. So let's see if you can remember what happened.
Okay.
That Christmas morning, Santa Claus brought you a bicycle helmet. Santa Claus brought you a bicycle helmet. And then I told a story about what you did once you got the helmet, once you opened the present with the helmet in it. Okay. Did you A, put the helmet on, get on your bike, and ride around the neighborhood? B, take the helmet and use it to hold a bunch of potato chips, which you then ate? Or C, did you put the helmet on and go back to bed and fall asleep while wearing the helmet?
Well, I'm sure I did put the helmet on and ride around the neighborhood on my bicycle with it, but that wasn't what you said, and I didn't remember this, so I certainly remember wearing the helmet, of course. And I'm not one who would mix potato chips and the perspiration, el sudor, right, of a helmet together. Eso sería muy asqueroso para mí. So it has to be that I put the helmet on and fell back asleep, and I have since then had horrible neck pain.
Okay, why don't we do one more? We talked about a particular thing that Dad would do at Christmas time. And our dad would call them pew.
Mm-hmm.
What do you remember that pew was? Was it was it A, a type of gun, B, a type of colorful aluminum Christmas decoration, or C, a type of horn?
Hey. Hey. Well, although many boys do receive guns at Christmas time, that is a popular thing, especially in the South where we live. I did not ever receive an actual gun. No horns. Dad did not like noise, so he would never have bought us a horn. So the answer is it was a type of aluminum decoration that looked like fireworks or fuegos artificiales when they explode. So he called it a pew.
That's correct. You see, your memory is not as bad as you thought.
I wish I could remember being skinny. We sure do want to thank you for walking down memory lane with us and listening to this episode. We especially want to thank our patrons. If you would like to support this show, you can go to www.patreon.com/No Te Rindas Podcast and see how to become un mecena, a patron. We'll shout you out in the next episode. You can receive a printable text of examples given on the show, and for shows like today, you can receive a transcript word for word of what we've said. We also want to shout out listeners who listen to us week after week. Today, we want to focus on a listener in Bogotá, Colombia. Muchas gracias. Y otro en Santiago, Chile. Gracias a ustedes.
Sí, gracias a ustedes.
Anything else come to mind, Gabe?
Yeah, want to remind you to please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or whatever podcast platform you listen to us on. It really does help us reach other listeners. And como siempre, si tienes alguna duda o sugerencia sobre el podcast, por favor, mándanos un email por questions@noterrindaspodcast.us.
And it's at noterindaspodcast.us that you can find a link to our Google Play Store. We have 3 apps that you can play, and there will soon be 4, that correspond to our episodes. So if you want to practice, si quieres practicar lo que has oído en el episodio, puedes bajar la aplicación a tu teléfono Android y jugar. Well, Gabe, Merry Christmas, man. Thank you for all the wonderful memories. Christmas would not be the same without my bro.
Well, thank you for this time and for these happy memories. I haven't thought about some of this stuff in years, and I'm especially, I think it's especially good to know that that you're the one that broke that golf club, because I always wondered. I had blamed myself for that. No, I'm just kidding. Very, very happy memories. I still remember your smiling face as you slept wearing that bicycle helmet, and how cute that was, even to me when I was 9. So anyway, Merry Christmas to you. And I look forward to us doing another episode soon. And you think we'll do one more before the new year?
Yeah, I think we'll talk about Run. We'll have part 2 of our last episode, Modismos que emplean la palabra run.
Right. Okay, so we'll do one more before the new year. So that's exciting. Well, I look forward to seeing you then.
Okay, love you. Bye-bye.
Love you. Bye-bye.